My name is Earl Donovan, 72 years old, and I spent 45 years building a real estate empire from nothing. I thought my son Jason understood what family loyalty meant, but I was wrong. While I lay unconscious after heart surgery, he forged papers and sold my $5.5 million Malibu beach house, thinking I would never know. I discovered everything but said nothing. I just waited, planning carefully, until the night of his grand celebration party. Before I share what happened next, where are you watching from? Drop a like and subscribe if you have ever trusted someone who betrayed you. I was born with nothing but determination. After serving 4 years in the Army, I returned home to California with $700 to my name and a dream of building something lasting. I started as a construction worker, spending 12 hours a day pouring foundations and framing houses. My hands were calloused, my back ached constantly, but I saved every penny possible. When I turned 30, I took a risk and used my savings to buy my first fixer-upper property. It was a disaster of a house that nobody wanted, but I saw potential where others saw problems. I spent 6 months renovating it myself on evenings and weekends, then sold it for nearly double what I paid. That was the beginning of Donovan Real Estate Investments. Within 5 years, I owned 7 rental properties. By 40, I had developed my first small apartment complex. The secret was never cutting corners, always delivering quality, and treating tenants with respect. My reputation grew, and so did my business. I met Sarah when I was developing a small shopping center. She was the loan officer at the bank, beautiful and brilliant with numbers. We married within a year. When Jason was born 2 years later, I thought my life was complete. I had everything a man could want: success, love, and now a son to carry on my legacy. Jason never knew struggle. That was by design. Sarah and I wanted to give him everything we never had: private schools, summer camps, music lessons, sports equipment. Nothing was too good for our boy. I worked longer hours to ensure he had the best of everything. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to build big buildings just like you," he told me when he was 7, looking up at one of my commercial developments with wide, admiring eyes. "You will, son. All this will be yours someday," I promised him. By the time Jason was a teenager, I was successful enough to afford luxury, but I still tried to teach him value. For his 16th birthday, he wanted a brand new sports car. Instead, I bought him a decent used sedan and told him if he wanted to upgrade, he could work summer jobs and save for the difference. "But Danny Friedman's dad got him a Ferrari," he complained. "I am not Danny Friedman's dad," I told him firmly. "Donovans understand the value of earning what we have." He sulked for weeks, but eventually took a job at one of my construction sites. I had the foreman treat him just like any other worker. No special privileges. By the end of that summer, he had developed some calluses and saved nearly $4,000. I was proud of him and matched his savings as a reward for his hard work. He upgraded to a better car, not a Ferrari, but something he could feel proud of because he had earned it. Sarah was always the buffer between us. When I was too stern, she softened my approach. When I pushed too hard, she reminded me that Jason needed space to find his own path. We were a balanced team. Then cancer took her when Jason was 19. It was aggressive, and within 6 months of diagnosis, she was gone. The loss devastated us both. I threw myself into work to cope with the grief. Jason withdrew, dropped out of college, and started partying with a wealthy crowd I didn't approve of. "Your mother would want you to finish your education," I told him during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. "You don't know what she would want," he shot back. "You were never home anyway." His words cut deep because there was truth in them. I had built my business for my family, but sometimes at the cost of time with them. After Sarah died, the gulf between Jason and me widened. I tried to bridge it by bringing him into the family business when he turned 21. I started him in property management, hoping he would learn the business from the ground up as I had. But Jason was impatient. He wanted to jump straight to development and big deals. He had ideas for luxury condos and high-end retail spaces that looked good on paper but ignored market realities. Real estate isn't just about pretty buildings, son. It's about understanding value, location, timing, and most importantly, risk. I explained after turning down one of his proposals. You need to learn the fundamentals before taking big swings. Your methods are outdated, he argued. We're losing opportunities because you're too cautious. Over the years, I did let him take on more responsibility, but I kept final approval on all major decisions. This arrangement frustrated him enormously. By the time he was 35, Jason had grown increasingly resentful of what he called my micromanagement. What I saw as mentorship, he experienced as control. Then my health began to fail. Years of stress and hard work had taken a toll. My doctor detected an irregular heartbeat during a routine physical. Further tests revealed I needed a valve replacement. Major surgery, with a lengthy recovery period. You'll need to take it easy for at least 8 weeks after the procedure, Mr. Donovan, my cardiologist advised. No work, no stress. For a man who hadn't taken a vacation in 10 years, this was a difficult pill to swallow. But I had no choice. I needed to put some temporary measures in place for my business. 2 weeks before my scheduled surgery, I called Jason to my home office. I need you to handle some basic affairs while I'm recovering, I told him, sliding a document across my desk. This is a limited power of attorney. It gives you authority to handle routine business operations, pay bills, and manage existing properties. Nothing more. He picked up the paper, scanning it with a frown. This is pretty restrictive. It's temporary, I assured him, just until I'm back on my feet. What Jason didn't know was that over the past 5 years, I had been quietly making some personal investments separate from our main business. Properties purchased through shell companies and trusts that didn't appear in our regular corporate holdings. Not because I was hiding assets, but because I was planning for eventual succession and wanted to test certain investment strategies without risking our core business. Among these investments were 2 nearly identical beach houses in Malibu, just 2 miles apart along the coast. Both magnificent properties with ocean views, private beach access, and luxury amenities. I had purchased them as part of a long-term plan. One was legally registered in the company name that Jason knew about. The other, the more valuable one with better beach frontage, was held in a separate trust he knew nothing about. I called it my retirement insurance. I never imagined that this secret second property would soon become far more important than I had planned. The surgery was more complicated than expected. What should have been a 4-hour procedure stretched to nearly 7 as the surgical team encountered unexpected complications. I later learned that I had flatlined twice on the operating table before they stabilized me. I awoke in the ICU 3 days later, disoriented and weak, with tubes and monitors connected to seemingly every part of my body. The recovery was brutal. Breathing was painful. Walking to the bathroom was an exhausting journey, and sleep came in fitful bursts interrupted by nurses taking vital signs. You had us worried, Mr. Donovan, my surgeon said during morning rounds a week after my surgery. Your heart took quite a beating, but you're stubborn. Recovery will be longer than we initially discussed. I want to keep you here another week, then at least 6 weeks of home care with a nurse. I spent a total of 16 days in the hospital before being discharged. Jason visited sporadically, always seeming distracted and in a hurry. He brought paperwork occasionally, asking for signatures on what he claimed were urgent business matters that couldn't wait. In my medicated haze, I signed several documents without fully reviewing them, trusting my son to honor the limitations I had put in place. My first day home, I was too exhausted to do more than move from my bed to a recliner in my bedroom, where the home health nurse monitored my vitals and administered medications. By the end of the first week, I was able to shuffle around the main floor of my house with a walker. It was during the 3rd week of my home recovery that I first noticed something was wrong. My longtime housekeeper, Rosa, brought in a stack of mail that had accumulated. Among the items was a bank statement from one of my personal accounts, one that Jason shouldn't have had access to. That's odd, I murmured, noticing a transfer of $20,000 to another account I didn't recognize. I set the statement aside, too tired to deal with it that day. The following afternoon, while the nurse was out picking up my prescriptions, I asked Rosa to bring me my laptop. Moving to my home office for the first time since my surgery, I logged into my banking accounts. What I found sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my physical condition. There had been multiple large transfers from various accounts over the past month. Some were from business accounts Jason had legitimate access to, but others were from my personal accounts that should have been off limits. In total, nearly $600,000 had been moved. This doesn't make sense, I muttered to myself. With growing concern, I opened my safe and retrieved my property files. The folder containing documents for the Malibu beach house, the one that was in the company name, was missing entirely. A quick search of my email revealed nothing about any transactions involving that property. I called my personal attorney, Thomas Wright, a man I had trusted for 30 years. Thomas, I need you to quietly check if there have been any property transactions involving Donovan Real Estate in the past month, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can do that, Earl. Give me a day, he replied. The next morning, Thomas called with news that stopped my heart more effectively than any surgical complication. Earl, the Malibu property at 1857 Ocean Drive was sold 3 weeks ago for $5.5 million. The paperwork appears to have your signature on it. I felt my chest tighten. I never authorized that sale. The funds were wired to the company account, and then most of it was transferred out to a new LLC called Jason Donovan Investments. Thomas continued gravely. Get me copies of everything, I managed to say through the shock. When the documents arrived via courier that afternoon, I locked myself in my office to review them. The signature on the sale authorization looked like mine, but I knew with absolute certainty I had never signed it. It was a forgery, skillfully done, but a forgery nonetheless. I sat back in my chair, feeling a pain that had nothing to do with my surgical wound. My own son had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. He had stolen from me, forged my signature, and sold property he had no right to sell, all while I was fighting for my life. The irony was that he had sold the less valuable of my 2 Malibu properties, not knowing about the second, more valuable beach house just 2 miles down the coast. But that fact brought me no comfort as I faced the reality of his deception. I was still sitting there, staring at the documents, when Jason himself showed up unannounced. He strolled into my office with a casual confidence that now seemed sinister rather than assured. "Dad, you shouldn't be out of bed yet," he said, frowning at seeing me at my desk. "I had some business to attend to," I replied, watching him carefully. "That's what I'm here for," he said with a smile that now seemed false. "You need to focus on recovery." "I was just reviewing some property matters," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the rage and hurt boiling inside me. A flicker of something, concern perhaps, crossed his face before he composed himself. "The doctor said no stress. I've been handling everything." "Yes, I can see that," I said, "including selling the Malibu house." His expression froze momentarily before he launched into what was clearly a prepared explanation. "That was a strategic decision, Dad. Beachfront maintenance costs are skyrocketing, and the market is peaking. We got an incredible price, and I've reinvested the funds into a development opportunity that will yield much better returns. Plus, you always said that house was too much trouble to maintain. With your health condition, it made sense to liquidate it now." Each lie that spilled from his lips felt like a fresh wound. This was my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had groomed to continue my legacy, now standing before me spinning falsehoods without remorse. "I see," was all I said, not trusting myself to say more without revealing the depth of my knowledge and feelings. "Trust me, it was the right move," he continued, seemingly encouraged by my calm reaction. "I've got everything under control." I simply nodded, a plan already beginning to form in my mind. Jason clearly believed I was too weak, too diminished by my health crisis to challenge him. Perhaps for now, it was best to let him continue thinking that. "I'm tired," I said, rising slowly from my chair. "I think I'll rest now." "Good idea," Jason agreed, relief evident in his voice. "Don't worry about anything. Just focus on getting stronger." As he helped me back to my bedroom, his hand on my arm felt like a stranger's. The son I thought I knew had vanished, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who saw my vulnerability as an opportunity for exploitation rather than protection. That night, alone in my room, I suffered a setback in my recovery. My blood pressure spiked dangerously, and I experienced chest pains that prompted my night nurse to call my cardiologist. The emotional trauma had manifested physically, as the heart I had just had surgically repaired struggled under the weight of betrayal. As I lay in bed later, stabilized but weakened, I made a decision. I would not confront Jason immediately. I would watch, gather evidence, and plan my response carefully. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about justice, consequences, and perhaps, if possible, redemption. My son had made his move, thinking I was too weak to respond. He didn't realize that the man who had built an empire from nothing still had fight left in him. More importantly, he didn't know about my ace in the hole, the second beach house that was legally unassailable. I would recover my strength, bide my time, and wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, Jason would learn that his betrayal carried a price he was not prepared to pay. The next morning, I called Thomas again and asked him to come to the house when Jason would be out. I needed legal counsel I could trust completely. "What are you planning to do, Earl?" Thomas asked after I had shown him all the evidence of Jason's fraud. "Nothing. For now," I replied, looking out the window of my office. "I want to see how far he'll go." Thomas frowned. "This is serious criminal activity. Forgery, fraud, theft. He could face significant jail time." "He's still my son," I said quietly. "Before I decide his fate, I need to understand why he did this. Is it just greed or something deeper?" After Thomas left, I began what would become nearly 2 months of silent observation. I instructed my home health nurse to report to Jason that I was experiencing memory issues and confusion as a side effect of my surgery and medications. It wasn't entirely a lie. The doctor had warned cognitive effects were possible, but I was exaggerating them significantly. "Your father seems very disoriented sometimes," I overheard the nurse telling Jason. "He asked me the same question 3 times yesterday. The doctor says it might improve with time, but for now, we should limit his stress and decision-making." Jason's face showed relief at this news. "I'll handle everything," he assured her. "Just focus on his physical recovery." My apparent mental decline gave Jason even more confidence. He began bringing more paperwork for me to sign, always explaining them as routine matters while I pretended to barely understand what I was signing. In reality, I was signing with a slightly altered version of my signature, creating evidence of coercion that could be used later if necessary. Meanwhile, I had Thomas hire a private investigator to track Jason's activities and financial movements. The reports came in weekly, each more disturbing than the last. Jason had indeed created a new LLC, through which he had purchased a $4 million mansion in Beverly Hills. He was driving a new $200,000 sports car and had been shopping at high-end stores, spending tens of thousands on clothes, watches, and electronics. The remaining money from the beach house sale was being used to court wealthy investors for what appeared to be a luxury condominium development. Most troubling was the change in his social circle. Gone were his few long-term friends, replaced by a crowd of wealthy partygoers, aspiring models, and self-proclaimed entrepreneurs. He was hosting lavish gatherings at his new mansion nearly every weekend. Rosa, my housekeeper who had been with me for 20 years, became my eyes and ears when Jason visited the house. "He brought a woman here yesterday while you were napping," she told me one morning as she brought my breakfast. "She was looking at your art collection like she was shopping. I heard him tell her they would look perfect in their new place." I nodded, adding this information to my growing file. "Thank you, Rosa. Remember, it's important he doesn't know I'm more lucid than I appear." "I understand, Mr. Donovan," she said solemnly. "My loyalty is to you, always." As the weeks passed and my physical strength returned, I maintained the charade of mental feebleness around Jason. During his increasingly infrequent visits, I would ask repetitive questions, appear confused about basic facts, and sometimes stare vacantly as if lost in my own thoughts. The doctors say this confusion might be permanent. I overheard him telling someone on the phone one day, "It actually works out better this way. He's not questioning any of my decisions." The casual cruelty of those words cut deep, but I channeled the pain into resolve. In my private moments, I was meticulously documenting everything. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, every asset purchased with stolen funds. 6 weeks after my surgery, when I was alone in the house, Except for Rosa, I decided to visit my secret second beach house. I had Thomas pick me up and drive me to the property, a stunning contemporary home perched on a bluff with panoramic ocean views and a private staircase down to a secluded beach. As I stood on the deck, watching waves crash against the shore, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This place, unknown to Jason, represented not just financial security but a symbolic triumph. Even in his betrayal, he had failed to truly defeat me. "It's still magnificent," Thomas commented, standing beside me. "Yes," I agreed. "And it reminds me of an important truth. No matter how much Jason has taken, he couldn't take everything because he didn't know everything." During this period of watching and waiting, I reconnected with an old friend, Frank Holden, a retired police detective who had purchased several investment properties through me years ago. I invited him to my home, ostensibly to discuss property management, but with another purpose in mind. "This is quite a situation you've got, Earl," Frank said after I revealed what had been happening. "You understand I'm obligated to report certain crimes if I have knowledge of them." "That's partly why I called you," I admitted. "I want to do this right, legally and ethically. But I also want to handle it my way, if possible." Frank considered this. "There's nothing illegal about gathering evidence before reporting a crime. And there's certainly nothing wrong with confronting someone with their wrongdoing before involving authorities." "Exactly," I nodded. "I need to see his reaction when he realizes what he's done and who he's done it to. I need to look in his eyes and understand if there's anything of the son I raised still in there." As my observation continued, I learned through the private investigator that Jason was planning a massive housewarming party at his Beverly Hills mansion. He had hired event planners, caterers, and even a well-known DJ. The guest list included local celebrities, business associates, and various socialites. "It seems he's planning to announce his new development project at this event," the investigator reported. "He's billing himself as the new face of luxury real estate in Los Angeles." That night, alone in my study, I faced difficult questions about what I was doing. Was I being too calculating, too cold in my approach? Sarah would have urged compassion, reminded me that people make terrible mistakes for complicated reasons. But Sarah hadn't witnessed our son's betrayal, his willingness to steal from his own father while I was at my most vulnerable. The next morning, I made a decision. The party would be the perfect setting for a reckoning, public enough to make the lesson meaningful, but contained enough to give us both a chance to salvage something afterward, if that proved possible. I called Thomas and Frank to my house to finalize the plan. "Are you absolutely sure about this approach?" Thomas asked, concern evident in his voice. "It's going to burn bridges that might be difficult to rebuild." "Some bridges need to burn," I replied firmly. "The question is whether something better can be built in their place." Frank was more pragmatic. "I've spoken with some former colleagues. They're ready to move when you give the word. All the evidence has been properly documented." I nodded, feeling the weight of what was to come. "Then we proceed as planned. The party is in 3 days. The day before the event, I visited my cardiologist for a scheduled checkup. He was pleased with my physical recovery. "Your heart is healing nicely, Mr. Donovan," he said, reviewing my test results. "But I'm concerned about your stress levels. Your blood pressure is still higher than I'd like." "I've been dealing with some family issues," I admitted, "but they should be resolved soon. Just remember that emotional health is crucial to cardiac recovery," he cautioned. "Try to avoid confrontations or high-stress situations for at least another month." I thanked him for the advice, knowing I would be ignoring it completely the very next day. Some things were worth risking your heart for, like fighting for justice and perhaps saving your son from himself. That night, I hardly slept, thinking about all the possible outcomes of my planned confrontation. Would Jason show remorse when exposed? Would he lash out, run? By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. The time for watching and waiting was over. Today, my son would learn that actions have consequences, no matter who your father is. The morning of Jason's housewarming party, I met with Thomas and Frank at my house to review every detail of our plan. We sat in my study, documents spread across my large mahogany desk, going through a carefully prepared timeline. "The party starts at 7, I noted, checking the invitation that my private investigator had secured. "I'll arrive at 6:30. before most guests. I want time to observe everything before making my move. Thomas nodded, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the legal documents. I've prepared everything. The affidavit detailing the fraud, documentation of the forged signatures verified by 2 handwriting experts, and evidence of all unauthorized financial transactions. Frank added his update. I've coordinated with Detective Reynolds. He and 2 officers will be positioned nearby, ready to enter when you give the signal. They have the warrant for financial fraud and forgery. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. To be clear, I'm not looking to send my son to prison for 20 years. I want him to face consequences, yes, but also to have a chance at redemption. That's why we structured it this way, Thomas reminded me. The charges filed will be serious enough to demand attention but allow for a plea arrangement later, especially with your input as the victim. I turned to Rosa, who had been quietly listening. Are you sure about your part in this? Jason might never forgive you. The housekeeper straightened her shoulders. Mr. Donovan, I have watched that boy grow up. What he did to you while you were sick, that is unforgivable. I will do my part. Her role was simple but crucial. She would call Jason shortly before I arrived, claiming I had taken a turn for the worse and was insisting on seeing him at his new home. This would ensure he would be expecting me, but not suspecting my true purpose. After finalizing our plans, I took time to visit my second beach house one more time. I drove myself, enjoying the freedom of being behind the wheel again after months of recovery. The coastal road curved gently along the shoreline, offering spectacular views of the Pacific. Under different circumstances, it would have been a pleasant drive. The beach house stood as I had left it, elegant and serene. I walked through each room slowly, reminding myself that regardless of what happened tonight, I still had this sanctuary. More importantly, I had my integrity intact. Standing on the deck overlooking the ocean, I thought about Sarah. What would she say about all this? Would she approve of my methods? Probably not entirely. She always favored direct communication over elaborate schemes, but she also believed firmly in consequences. Love without accountability isn't love at all, she used to say. It's just enabling. I spoke aloud to her memory, my voice carried away by the ocean breeze. I'm doing what I think is right, Sarah. Not just for me, but for him too. He needs to learn this lesson now, while he has time to change course. On the drive back, I stopped at a small seaside restaurant Sarah and I had frequented. Sitting alone at a table overlooking the water, I ordered her favorite seafood pasta and a glass of wine. It was a small ritual, gathering strength from her memory before the confrontation to come. By late afternoon, I returned home to prepare. I chose my clothing carefully, a perfectly tailored dark blue suit that Sarah had always said made me look distinguished. Not my most expensive suit, but one that projected authority without ostentation. I wanted Jason to see the father he had underestimated, not the confused old man he thought he had deceived. At 5:45, right on schedule, Rosa called Jason. Mr. Jason, your father is very agitated, she told him, her voice convincingly worried. He is insisting on seeing your new house. I cannot calm him down. He has already called a car service. 20 minutes later, Thomas picked me up. Frank followed in a separate vehicle, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection. The drive to Beverly Hills was tense with anticipation. Thomas tried to fill the silence with reassurances. Remember, Earl, stay calm regardless of his reaction. Your health is still fragile. I nodded, watching the familiar landmarks of Los Angeles pass by. I've been preparing for this moment for 2 months, Thomas. I know exactly what I need to do. We arrived at the address, a newly constructed mansion in one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive neighborhoods. It was ostentatious, with a circular driveway leading to imposing front doors flanked by decorative fountains. Catering vans were parked nearby, staff busily preparing for the evening's festivities. Subtle, isn't it? Thomas remarked dryly. About what I'd expect, I replied. Wait here initially. I'll text you when to come in. I approached the front door alone, noting the security cameras monitoring the entrance. Good. There would be no denying what happened here tonight. I rang the bell and waited. standing straight despite the persistent ache in my chest. A reminder of my surgery. Jason opened the door himself, surprise registering on his face before he composed it into concern. "Dad, what are you doing here? Rosa called about you being upset, but I didn't expect you to actually come." His eyes darted past me nervously, checking if anyone had accompanied me. "I wanted to see your new home," I said simply. "Aren't you going to invite your father in?" He hesitated just a moment too long before stepping aside. "Of course, come in, but I'm in the middle of preparing for a party. It's not a good night for a visit." I stepped into an expansive foyer with a soaring ceiling and marble floors. The space was decorated lavishly, with expensive art on the walls and designer furniture arranged for the upcoming party. Flower arrangements worth thousands of dollars adorned various surfaces. "Impressive," I commented, walking further into the house as if admiring it. In reality, I was taking inventory of all the luxury items purchased with my stolen money. "Let me show you around quickly," Jason said, clearly wanting to control my movements. "Then maybe we can schedule a proper visit another day." "Of course," I agreed mildly. "Lead the way." He guided me through the main areas of the first floor, nervously explaining features of the house while repeatedly checking his watch. Staff members moved about, preparing food and arranging drinks for the party. Some gave curious glances at the older man being shown around just before a major event. When we reached his study, I paused to examine a framed architectural rendering on the wall. It showed a luxurious condominium development with Donovan legacy towers emblazoned across the top. "Is this your new project?" I asked innocently. Jason's face lit up, momentarily forgetting his discomfort. "Yes, it's going to revolutionize luxury living in downtown. I'm announcing it officially tonight." "Interesting name," I observed. "Donovan Legacy. Well, I am carrying on your work, just with a modern vision," he replied, some defiance entering his tone. I nodded thoughtfully. "And how much of the beach house money went into this?" The question hung in the air for a long, tense moment. Jason's expression froze, then shifted through surprise, fear, and finally calculation. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. "The Malibu beach house. The one you sold for $5.5 million using forged documents while I was recovering from heart surgery," I clarified, my voice remaining even. "How much of that money funded this house, this party, this development plan?" His face paled. "Dad, you're confused. We discussed the sale. You agreed it was the right move strategically." I held his gaze steadily. "No, Jason. We never discussed it because you knew I would never agree to it. You saw an opportunity when I was at my weakest and you took it. You forged my signature, stole my property, and used the money to finance your own ambitions." He switched tactics, his expression softening into concern. "Dad, your doctors mentioned you might experience some memory issues after the surgery. This is exactly what they warned about. We absolutely discussed selling that property. I would never make such a major move without your approval." I almost admired his commitment to the lie. Almost. "Text Thomas to come in," I said, pulling out my phone and sending the message myself. "And while we wait for him, let's discuss the second beach house, the one you don't know about." Confusion crossed his face. "What second beach house?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Jason looked torn between answering it and continuing our conversation. "You should get that," I suggested. "It's important." When Jason left to answer the door, I took the opportunity to send a second text, this one to Frank. "Proceed with phase 2. Thomas entered the study a moment later, carrying his briefcase, with Jason following behind, looking increasingly concerned. "What is this, Dad?" he demanded. "I have guests arriving in less than an hour." "This," I said calmly, "is the moment of truth." The caterers were putting final touches on elaborate food displays when the doorbell rang again. Jason, already agitated by Thomas's arrival, threw his hands up in frustration. "Who else did you bring?" he demanded, storming toward the front door. I followed at a measured pace, Thomas beside me. When Jason opened the door, he found Frank standing there, alongside 2 uniformed police officers and Detective Reynolds in plain clothes. "Jason Donovan?" Detective Reynolds asked formally. "Yes," Jason replied, his voice suddenly uncertain. "What is this about?" I'm Detective Reynolds with the Financial Crimes Unit. We have some questions about certain property transactions and potentially fraudulent documents. Jason's face drained of color as he looked back at me, understanding finally dawning. You set this up, he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. May we come in? Detective Reynolds continued professionally. We can discuss this privately, or we can continue at the station. Jason reluctantly stepped aside, allowing the officers to enter. By now, several catering staff had paused their work to watch the unfolding scene. A young woman in an evening dress, presumably an early arriving guest, stood frozen in the foyer, clutching a gift bag. Perhaps we could use your study, I suggested to Jason, taking control of the situation. Our unusual procession, led by Jason with police officers following, moved through the house to his study. Once inside, with the door closed, Detective Reynolds began formally. Mr. Jason Donovan, we're investigating allegations of forgery, fraud, and theft relating to the sale of a property at 1857 Ocean Drive in Malibu and subsequent financial transactions. This is ridiculous, Jason protested, though his voice lacked conviction. That was a legitimate business decision made with my father's full knowledge and approval. Thomas opened his briefcase and removed a folder. I have here the original limited power of attorney document signed by Earl Donovan, which explicitly prohibits the sale of any real estate holdings without additional specific authorization. He passed the document to Detective Reynolds, who reviewed it briefly before continuing. I also have forensic analysis of the signatures on the sale documents, confirming they are forgeries, Thomas added, producing another report. Jason's composure began to crack. Dad, why are you doing this? Whatever misunderstanding we have, we could have worked it out privately. I studied my son's face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse rather than mere regret at being caught. This stopped being a private family matter the moment you committed multiple felonies, Jason. The doorbell rang again, followed by the sounds of arriving guests. Jason looked desperately toward the door. I have 70 people arriving for an important business announcement, he pleaded. Your announcement about Donovan Legacy Towers? I asked calmly. The project primarily funded by stolen money? Yes. I imagine that will have to be postponed indefinitely. Detective Reynolds placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. Mr. Donovan, at this point I need to inform you that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As the detective continued reading the Miranda rights, I watched my son's face transition from disbelief to anger and finally to a kind of resigned shock. This was the moment I had planned for weeks, yet I took no pleasure in seeing him brought low, only sadness at the choices that had led us here. The study door suddenly opened as a young woman in designer evening wear burst in. Jason, what's going on? There are police cars outside and people are starting to talk. She stopped short, taking in the scene before her, her eyes widening as she noticed the uniformed officers. Alicia, Jason said tensely, everything's fine. Just a misunderstanding about some business matters. Are those handcuffs? She asked incredulously, pointing to what Detective Reynolds was holding. Before Jason could answer, another interruption came as the party planner appeared in the doorway. Mr. Donovan, we have a situation. The guests are arriving, but they're seeing police cars. Should we start serving drinks, or? His voice trailed off as he assessed the room's atmosphere. The party is canceled, I stated firmly when Jason seemed unable to respond. Please inform the guests there's been a family emergency. Wait, Jason protested. You can't just, I've invested over $50,000 in this event. Correction, I said coldly. You invested my $50,000 in this event. Money obtained through fraud. Detective Reynolds intervened. Sir, we need to continue this discussion at the station. You'll have an opportunity to contact your attorney there. This is how you want to handle this? Jason asked me, his voice dropping low as the officers prepared to escort him out. Humiliating me in front of everyone? Destroying everything I've built? You built nothing, I replied, maintaining eye contact. You stole, and what's being destroyed here is entirely your doing. As Detective Reynolds led Jason toward the door, the full impact of the situation seemed to hit my son. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, replaced by naked panic. "Dad, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't do this. I'll fix everything. I'll sell the house, return the money, whatever you want." For a moment, I almost wavered, seeing the frightened boy beneath the man's exterior. But then I remembered lying in the hospital, fighting for my life, while he systematically betrayed my trust. "It's too late for that, Jason," I said quietly. "Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." By now, the foyer had filled with confused guests in evening attire, watching in stunned silence as Jason was escorted toward the front door. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones came out, capturing the scene. Tomorrow, this would be all over social media. Jason's humiliation, complete and public. Alicia ran after them, her voice shrill with distress. "Jason, should I call your lawyer? What do I tell everyone?" Jason looked back once before being placed in the police car, his eyes finding mine across the crowded foyer. In that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Beneath the anger and fear, a flicker of relief, as if some burden had been lifted. As the police car pulled away, the remaining guests began dispersing rapidly, their excited chatter filling the night air. The catering staff stood awkwardly, uncertain what to do with the elaborate food and drink preparations. Thomas approached me, concern evident on his face. "Are you all right, Earl? This can't have been easy." I realized I was clutching the doorframe for support, suddenly feeling every day of my 72 years. "It had to be done," I said, though the victory felt hollow. Frank joined us, having stayed behind while the officers took Jason to the station. "Reynolds will keep me updated on the processing. He understands the unique circumstances here." I nodded gratefully, then addressed the bewildered party planner. "Please ensure the staff are all paid in full. The food can be donated to a local shelter." As the house emptied of disappointed guests and confused service personnel, I found myself standing alone in Jason's lavish living room, surrounded by evidence of his misplaced ambition. Crystal glasses arranged in perfect pyramids, elaborate floral centerpieces, a banner announcing Donovan Legacy Towers, the future of luxury living. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jason had wanted so desperately to create his legacy that he had destroyed his inheritance, both financial and moral. In trying to step out of my shadow, he had fallen into darkness of his own making. Thomas found me still standing there 20 minutes later. "The car is ready whenever you are," he said gently. "I need a minute," I replied, walking slowly through the rooms of the mansion, taking in details I had missed earlier. In the master bedroom, I found framed photos on the dresser. Most were of Jason, with celebrities or at exclusive events. But one caught my eye. It was an old picture of Jason as a boy of about 10, sitting on my shoulders at the beach, both of us laughing in the sunshine. Sarah had taken that photo during a rare family vacation. I picked up the frame, my finger tracing the outline of our happy faces. Despite everything, he had kept this reminder of better times. Perhaps there was still something to salvage after all. With the photo in hand, I finally left the mansion, the door closing behind me on what should have been Jason's triumphant evening. Instead, it had become the night when his house of cards finally collapsed. The morning after the arrest, I woke early after a restless night. My chest ached, though whether from surgical recovery or emotional strain, I couldn't tell. The events of the previous evening played on repeat in my mind, particularly that final look Jason had given me as the police led him away. Thomas called at 7:30. "Jason was processed and held overnight," he reported. "Bail hearing is set for 10 this morning. Given the nature of the charges and his lack of prior record, he'll likely be released on bail." "Has he contacted an attorney?" I asked, sipping my coffee at the kitchen table. "Yes, Martin Greenfield, high-profile defense attorney who specializes in white-collar crime." I nodded to myself. Jason had always had good instincts for self-preservation. "What's your assessment of how this plays out legally?" Thomas sighed. "The evidence is overwhelming, Earl. Without your intervention, he's looking at serious time. Forgery, fraud, grand theft, possibly money laundering depending on how he structured those financial movements." After finishing the call, I checked the local news on my tablet. Sure enough, Jason's arrest had made the morning headlines. Real estate heir, arrested at own party. Alleged fraud against father. The article included a photo of Jason being escorted to the police car, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. My phone began ringing almost continuously. Business associates, friends, even distant acquaintances, all suddenly concerned about my well-being or hungry for gossip. I instructed Rosa to tell callers I was unavailable. By 9:30, I was dressed and waiting for Frank to pick me up. Despite Thomas's objections, I had decided to attend the bail hearing. "You don't have to be there," he had argued. "It only adds to the spectacle." "He's my son," I replied simply. "I need to see this through." The courthouse was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Several reporters recognized me as we walked in, shouting questions that I ignored. Inside the courtroom, I took a seat in the back row, hoping to observe without being immediately noticed. Jason was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his normally perfect hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He scanned the courtroom, freezing momentarily when he spotted me. Surprise registered on his face, followed by something unreadable before he turned away. "Wait," Jason protested. "You can't just, I've invested over $50,000 in this event." As Jason was let out, our eyes met briefly. This time, I thought I detected shame beneath his anger. Progress, perhaps. I left before he was released, not wanting to create a scene outside the courthouse. Frank drove me directly to the jail's administrative section, where bail would be processed. "Are you sure about this, Earl?" Frank asked as we parked. "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to speak with him privately before he disappears into his attorney's protective bubble." We waited in a small conference room that Frank had arranged through his contacts. After 40 minutes, the door opened, and Jason walked in, now dressed in the clothes he had been arrested in. Looking rumpled and exhausted, the hearing proceeded quickly. Bail was set at $1 million with conditions including surrendering his passport and wearing an ankle monitor. His attorney immediately indicated they would post bail. "Sit down, Jason," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He hesitated before complying, his movements stiff with tension. "If you're here to gloat, save it. My attorney says this whole case might get thrown out anyway." "We both know that's not true," I replied calmly. "The evidence is irrefutable." His jaw tightened. "Then why are you here?" I studied him for a moment. This stranger who shared my blood. "I wanted to look you in the eye, away from the lawyers and police and party guests, and ask you one simple question. Why?" Jason looked away, staring at the wall. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He remained silent for so long I thought he might refuse to answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "You never took me seriously. Never trusted me with anything important. Always looking over my shoulder, second-guessing every decision." "So this was about proving yourself?" I asked incredulously. "It was about taking control of my own life," he snapped, emotion breaking through. "Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? The great Earl Donovan, self-made real estate legend. Nothing I did was ever good enough. So you decided to steal from me instead of earn my respect?" "I didn't think of it as stealing," he muttered. "Just taking what would be mine eventually anyway." I leaned forward. "While I was fighting for my life in surgery, he had the decency to flinch at that. I didn't think you'd ever know. The plan was to make the development successful and eventually replace the money. With interest from your brilliant investment?" I asked sarcastically. "Something like that," he admitted quietly. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of his actions hanging between us. "There's something you should know," I finally said. "The beach house you sold wasn't the only one I owned in Malibu." His head snapped up. "What?" "I've owned a second beach house, just 2 miles down the coast, for nearly 5 years. It's held in a separate trust you knew nothing about. It's actually the more valuable property, worth nearly $7 million. Jason stared at me, processing this information. "Why would you keep that secret?" "It wasn't initially about keeping secrets from you. It was part of my personal retirement planning, separate from the business. But as I watched your attitude toward money and entitlement grow, I became more careful about what assets I held in my own name." The irony seemed to hit him suddenly. "So I committed multiple felonies to steal a house that wasn't even your best property." Despite everything, I found myself smiling slightly, at the absurdity. Life has a way of teaching lessons we refuse to learn voluntarily. Jason ran his hands through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of his teenage years. So what happens now? Am I going to prison? That depends, I said carefully. The evidence against you is substantial. Without my intervention, yes, you would almost certainly serve time. Hope flickered across his face. Your intervention? As the victim, I have significant influence over how the prosecution proceeds. I could push for maximum charges, or I could support a plea arrangement. And what would that involve? He asked cautiously. Full restitution, for starters. The house sold, all assets purchased with those funds liquidated and returned. I paused, making sure he understood the gravity of what I was offering. Community service, significant enough to be meaningful, and most importantly, a complete change in how you approach life and business. You want me to be more like you, he said, a hint of the old resentment returning. I shook my head. No, Jason, I want you to be better than me. I want you to be the man I know you can be, one who understands that true success isn't measured in dollar signs but in integrity. He looked down at his hands. I don't know if I can be that person. You can, I said with more confidence than I felt. But you'll have to earn back my trust, and that will take time. When he looked up again, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability untainted by manipulation. Why would you give me another chance? He asked quietly. After what I did? Because you're my son, I said simply, and because I share responsibility for how we got here. I was so focused on building something for you that I failed to build something with you. As our meeting concluded, I gave him the contact information for Thomas, who would help coordinate the legal strategy if he chose to accept my terms. Think carefully, Jason. This is your one opportunity to make this right, I said as I stood to leave. The choice is yours. He nodded solemnly. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Dad. Not just for getting caught, but for doing it at all. It wasn't full redemption, but it was a start. As Frank drove me home, I felt drained but somehow lighter, as if some long-carried burden had begun to shift. The road ahead would be difficult, with no guarantee of success. But for the first time in months, I felt hopeful about the possibility of rebuilding something that had been broken long before Jason ever sold that beach house. 3 months passed before Jason and I met again outside of courtrooms and lawyers' offices. During that time, much had changed. Following my conditions, he had agreed to a plea deal that included full restitution, 2 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service at a housing nonprofit that built affordable homes for low-income families. His Beverly Hills mansion had been sold, along with the sports car and most of his luxury possessions. The Donovan Legacy Towers project had been permanently shelved, the investors refunded from the sale proceeds. I had maintained my distance during this process, allowing him to face the consequences of his actions without interference. Thomas kept me updated on the legal proceedings, and occasionally I would drive past the construction sites where Jason was fulfilling his community service hours, watching from a distance as he worked alongside regular volunteers, learning to use hammers and saws for something productive. When I finally called him, it was to invite him to the beach house, the second property he hadn't known about. He accepted immediately. The day was clear and bright when he arrived, the ocean a deep blue against the horizon. I was waiting on the deck when his modest sedan, a far cry from his previous sports car, pulled into the driveway. Jason emerged looking different than I remembered. Thinner, more tanned from outdoor work, dressed in simple jeans and a button-down shirt rather than designer clothes. He approached somewhat hesitantly, as if unsure of his welcome. "This place is beautiful," he said, looking around at the property. "Even nicer than the other one." "I thought so too," I agreed. "Come inside." We toured the house together, discussing its features and the renovation work I had done over the years. The conversation was stiff at first, both of us carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, we settled in the living room, with its panoramic ocean views. "I appreciate you inviting me here," Jason said, breaking an awkward silence. "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again outside of legal meetings." "I needed time," I admitted, "and I thought you needed space to figure some things out for yourself." He nodded, looking out at the waves. I have been figuring things out, I mean. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. The community service. I thought it would be horrible. Just punishment to get through, but it's actually been good for me. In what way? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm working with people who have nothing but are grateful for everything. Families who cry when we hand them keys to a simple 2-bedroom house. He shook his head. It makes me ashamed of how entitled I've been. I studied him, looking for signs of the manipulation I had grown accustomed to. Instead, I saw what appeared to be genuine reflection. The project manager there, Mike, he's taught me more about actual building in 3 months than I learned in years of development deals. I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting an engineering degree to complement my business background. That sounds like a good path, I said cautiously. Jason turned to face me directly. Dad, I know I can never fully make up for what I did. Betraying your trust when you were at your most vulnerable. That's unforgivable. But I want you to know, I'm truly sorry. And I'm committed to being different going forward. I nodded slowly. Actions speak louder than words, Jason. But I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing so far. We talked for hours that day, more honestly than we had in years. About Sarah's death and how it had affected us both. About the pressure he had felt living up to my legacy and my disappointment when he seemed to reject the values I had tried to instill. I always thought you cared more about the business than about me, he confessed at one point. That I was just someone to pass it all to, not a person in my own right. And I thought you only cared about the wealth, not the work that created it, I countered. We both made assumptions without really talking to each other. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I decided it was time to discuss the future. I've been thinking about what comes next, I said. For both of us. Jason tensed slightly. What do you mean? The company needs restructuring. After everything that's happened, trust has been damaged with some of our long-term partners and investors. He looked down. Because of me. Yes, I said, not sugarcoating it, but also because of choices I made over the years. Being too controlling, not delegating properly, keeping too many decisions centralized. I stood up and walked to a side table where I had placed a folder earlier. Bringing it back, I handed it to Jason. What's this? He asked, taking it cautiously. A proposal. A new division of Donovan Real Estate focused exclusively on affordable and middle-income housing developments. Smaller profit margins but greater social impact. He opened the folder, scanning the business plan I had drafted. You want to start this new division? I want us to start it together, I clarified. You handling the day-to-day operations, me providing guidance and connections, but with one key difference from our previous arrangement. What's that? He asked. True partnership. Your name on the incorporation documents alongside mine. Equal decision-making authority. No more waiting for inheritance. You earn your place starting now. He looked stunned. After everything I did, you'd trust me with this? Trust has to be rebuilt from both sides, I said. This is me taking the first step. The housing nonprofit you're working with has already expressed interest in a private sector partner who understands their mission. You've gained valuable insights there that could make this successful. Jason studied the proposal more carefully, his expression thoughtful. This could actually work, he said slowly. Affordable housing is desperately needed. And with the right approach, we could do well while doing good. Exactly, I agreed. It would mean harder work for potentially less financial return, at least initially. Are you prepared for that? He looked me directly in the eyes. 3 months ago, I would have said no. Now, I think it might be the most meaningful thing I could do. We continued discussing the details as darkness fell, the house lights automatically illuminating as sensors detected the fading daylight. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, not yet. Too much damage had been done for instant healing. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which something new could be built. As Jason prepared to leave, I walked him to his car. The night air was cool, carrying the salt scent of the ocean. I've been thinking a lot about what matters, he said, keys in hand but not yet opening the car door. When I was sitting in that jail cell the night of the arrest, I realized I had surrounded myself with people who disappeared the moment I was in trouble. All the trappings of success without any substance. It's an expensive lesson to learn, I observed. But a valuable one, he countered. I don't want to be that person anymore. I nodded, then made a decision I had been contemplating all evening. There's something else I want to show you before you go. I led him back toward the house, but veered onto a path leading to a small, separate structure nestled among trees. Using a key from my pocket, I opened the door to reveal a simple but elegant office space. "What is this?" Jason asked, looking around at the desk, comfortable seating area, and wall of built-in bookshelves. "Sarah designed it," I explained. "She called it my thinking house. When we bought this property, she insisted I have a separate space just for reflection and creativity, away from the main house and its distractions." Jason ran his hand along the desk. "Mom always understood what people needed, sometimes before they did themselves." "Yes, she did," I agreed, feeling her presence strongly in this space she had created. "I've been coming here every morning to work on that business proposal and to think about our situation." I walked to a cabinet and opened it, revealing a small safe. After entering the combination, I removed a velvet pouch. "Your mother left this for you," I said, handing it to Jason. "I was supposed to give it to you when you were ready. I think that time is now." With questioning eyes, he opened the pouch and removed a small wooden box. Inside was a simple silver compass, clearly antique but in perfect condition. "It belonged to her father," I explained as he held it in his palm. "He used it during his time as a park ranger in Yosemite. She always said it reminded her that no matter how lost you might feel, there are always tools to help find your way back." Jason stared at the compass, emotion evident in his face. "I never knew she left this for me." "There's a note," I said, indicating a folded paper beneath where the compass had rested. He opened it carefully, reading his mother's handwriting in silence. I knew what it said, having read it myself years ago when Sarah had prepared it during her illness. "My dearest Jason, if you're reading this, it means your father believes you're facing a moment where you need direction. We all lose our way sometimes. What matters is having the courage to recognize when we're lost, and the wisdom to use the tools we're given to find our path again. This compass guided my father through wilderness and storms. May it remind you that even in your darkest moments, you have the ability to reorient and move forward with purpose. True north is always there, even when clouds obscure the stars. With eternal love, Mom." When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "Thank you for this," he said quietly. "It wasn't mine to give until now," I replied. "Sarah always saw the best in you, even when your choices didn't reflect it. She believed in your capacity to learn and grow from mistakes." As we walked back to his car in silence, I felt a sense of cautious hope. The path ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time and consistent effort to rebuild. But for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I could envision a future where my son and I found our way back to each other, perhaps building something even stronger than what had been lost. Sometimes the most valuable things we lose are the ones that force us to rediscover what truly matters, I told him as he opened his car door. "Remember that compass works both ways. It can help you find your path forward, but it can also guide you home when you're ready." He nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in my words. "I'll see you next week to continue planning the new division." "I'll be here," I promised. As his car disappeared down the driveway, I stood looking at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Life rarely gives us perfect endings, only new beginnings if we're brave enough to accept them. In the end, what I learned through this painful journey with my son was that true wealth has nothing to do with beach houses or bank accounts. It lies in the courage to hold those we love accountable, the wisdom to offer second chances when they're truly earned, and the strength to rebuild what's broken rather than simply discarding it. That night, as I sat alone on my deck, watching the moonlight play across the waves, I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. The future remained uncertain, but the bitter weight of betrayal had begun to lift, replaced by the tentative hope of renewal. Has someone in your life broken your trust? How did you handle it? And were you able to rebuild the relationship afterward? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from my 7 decades of experience. Remember that sometimes the deepest wounds can become the foundation for our greatest healing if we approach them with wisdom and grace. Thank you for listening to my story today.